Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you. For those of you who are here in April, I think we're going to be okay as far as weather goes. We're not going to get rained out, I hope. But thanks again for coming. The first thing we need to do, if you're planning on joining us for lunch at the Farnsworth House, head over to the flag there. Veronica's going to count you. So let's do that now. Go on over. Yeah. Funny though. I counted for it.
I took a poll too. I did the first. I was like, yeah.
All right. Now that we got the count, I hope you brought your bug spray because we're going in the fields. If you didn't bring any, I'm sure someone might have some they'd be happy to share with you. Debbie's nodding her head, so she's got some. Okay, it's over there and over there. Sorry, so we got some people that have it. Otherwise, that's it for me. And here is Lewis Trott.
Again, it's always my honor to be out here. Matt can employ much smarter people than me.
So you're doing a video?
Gladly do it. But he lets me do it every month. It is my favorite sport of every month. The last week and a half, my last thought before going to sleep was this tour.
Oh yeah.
Ours was tonight.
I did. On the corner of the Tilly Carson. Yeah.
But then it's back to this. We got the Willards Brigade next month. So, welcome to Gettysburg. Today we are doing the AG Brigade. I thought it was advertised the Willards Brigade, but it's actually the AG, 111th New York. The monument's right over there. I actually saw that. It didn't dawn on me until about a week and a half ago. I said, wait a minute.
Really?
What a Willards Brigade. I don't pay attention.
No, I was going to ask you.
Lucky I made it.
Sharing it with me.
But yes, we are doing Willards Brigade. So I have 3 goals. Coming up here, I figured the first 2 are fairly easy. The third one I have a problem with. The first one is safety.
I don't know. I'm assuming. I don't even know.
We are going to walk from here down past the Pennsylvania Monument. And at a certain point, we're going to hang a right. We're going to go out to a thicket. It's really not a thicket. It's more like a forest. And that's where our ending point is. However, in between us and that thicket, there's an artillery battery set up. I was down there earlier and I talked to Matt Atkinson. He's the ranger in charge of them. They have a program at 11. He thinks they'll be done by 11:30. They're going to fire 2 rounds. They're not firing rounds, of course, but they're going to fire twice. We cannot be in front of the cannon when they fire. As an old artillery gun chief, I completely understand. I don't want to be in front of their gun. Yeah. I want them to let me know when they're firing too, so I can plug my ears, because it's kind of shocks me. I hate that. I'm going to catch a heart attack one day when stuff like that happens. But we'll go down there. And when we go down there, we're going to stay on this side of the road. And let's be mindful, it's getting busy, especially this weekend of traffic. Let's stay on the side. I figured that Willard had a lot more men. He had about 1,500 men. And the monuments didn't bother him when he went down there, and they stayed off the road. I think we can do the same with less people. So let's just stay on the grass and make our way down there. Then we're going to cut behind the Pennsylvania Monument, and we'll go down past that artillery unit. Once they're done, we can go out into that field. And we're going out to Willards. You want to show them your little thing there, Mike? we're going out to that little monument. I hope I can find it because I looked for it last week and it's too weedy out there and it covers the little thing. Yeah. Has anybody not been there before? All right, good. I love taking people places they haven't been. And when we're out there, I'll explain. Willards men are actually farther along to the left. It's a lot weedier farther along to the left. And we don't have time to do it all. I wanted to go through the thicket, which is a forest, and keep going up to the Emmitsburg Road because there's a Willard advance marker. His brigade advance marker is up near the Emmitsburg Road. And you can get to it easier. You can go up the horse path up there, but that's not what we're about. We're not about easy. I looked at the weather schedule about 2 weeks ago, and I almost canceled this because it's not going to rain. If it ain't raining, we ain't training. I mean, some of these people run from this mess, but not us. So last month was fun. I got rushed at the end because it was a storm, and we had to get out of there. So we got out of there. So I hope everybody learned something from our time out there. It's a day we should have that problem. My second consideration is we learned something today. Maybe you already knew something about Willard, you learned something more, maybe you don't know anything about Willard. So everything you hear, whether it's right or wrong that I tell you, you're going to learn. If it's wrong, don't use it. And then my third consideration, don't get emotional. Everybody seen the movie Gettysburg? Yeah. Of course you have. So at the end of the movie, the very end, they're sitting on the camp stool. And Martin Sheen says to Tom Berenger, Tom, I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need y'all's help today. Keep me steady. At the end, I'm going to need some volunteers. I'm going to be 9 of them. Do I have any siblings in the group? No siblings? All right, how about non-natural siblings? Like you've known each other so long you think your brothers and sisters are brothers. Anything like that? All right, I'm going to need 9 people then. Not now, at the end. No, you're going to have to read something in front of the group. So, with that, we'll start our tour. Again, we'll deal with down there when we get down there. So, we are talking about today George Willards Brigade. A little bit about our players, if you will, the main players. The first one is Alexander Hayes. He is the division commander on this end of Hancock's line. Alexander Hayes is a West Point graduate. He graduated in 1844 with Winfield Hancock. So he knows Hancock from way back when. He's not in the Army, though, when the war breaks out. He's a civil engineer running around making money, something you don't do in the Army. But then he gets put in, I think it's the 63rd Pennsylvania when the Army breaks out. So he has extensive war service leading up to Gettysburg. He's been wounded at 2nd Manassas. After that wound, it's in his leg somewhere. He is sent to D.C., and he takes charge of some troops at D.C. And that's where he is when both armies start moving north from Virginia. Next we have George Lamb Willard. Anybody know why his middle name is Lamb? Did anybody know his middle name was Lamb? It's not a middle name. Don't you answer anymore. Anybody who walks around with a monument in their pocket is George Willard. I don't want you to answer my question. But it's the last name of his father and his grandfather, and they were both war veterans. So that's why it's George Lamb Willard. He was born August 15th, 1827 in New York City. He was married to Mary Plum. They got married October of 1854. He wants to go to West Point. And why wouldn't he? Because his father's a military vet, his grandfather's a military vet. But his parents don't want him to be in the military. They want him to go off and be a good businessman, like any good little boy. So instead, he goes and does that when the Mexican-American War, is that what it's called? American-Mexican War. When that breaks out, he volunteers, and he's put into the U.S. 15th Infantry. So he gets war experience there, and he's going to get a commission while he's there. Not everybody that's a regular Army officer out here had to go to West Point. You could volunteer for the service and make your way up the ranks. That's what Willard does. And then in August of 1862, he's made colonel of the 125th New York. So that's where he starts as far as our story. He's a colonel of the 125th. Next we have Levin Crandall, and you don't hear his name too often associated with this. He's sort of forgotten. He's in charge. He's the lieutenant colonel of the 125th. So he's Willard's subordinate. He was born in December 1826 in Easton, New York. Married to Catherine Crandall until she died. Then he got remarried to a woman named Carrie. He lives until 1907. He dies at the age of 80. I'll tell you all to the end of some of these people so I don't forget them. Before the war, he's a bookkeeper. And then finally we have Eliakim Sherrill. He's born in 1816, Greenville, New York, married to Emily Elridge. He was a politician and then a farmer before the war, and he helped organize the 126th New York Infantry Regiment in 1862. We have Clinton D. McDougal. Anybody know what the D stands for? Dougal. Clinton Dougal McDougal. I don't know. I actually think it was the last name of one of his father, his father, his grandfather. He was born June 14th, 1839 in Glasgow, Scotland. So he is not American, but he comes here. He was married to Mariana Cook, and he lives past this. He dies in 1914. So he lived a long life after this battle and after the war. He was a banker, and he was assigned Lieutenant Colonel of the 111th New York Infantry Regiment in August of 1862. Then finally we have Major Hugo Hildebrand. He was born in Hungary. He was taking part in all the German revolutions over there in Europe, 1848 stuff. He took command of the 39th New York Infantry Regiment when Colonel, how do you say it? Dutassi, Frederick Dutassi, is removed. Major Hildebrand is going to be wounded at this battle, and he's going to be discharged from the Army in December of 1863 because of his work. So, you have three of these regiments, the 125th, 126th, and the 111th, all come to be in 1862. It's after 2nd Manassas, and Lincoln issues another call for more troops. So he goes back to the states. He said, "This is your quota." And so all the states have the next group of enlistees signing up for 3 years. And you got these three regiments. Now, these three regiments are being trained once they get all their equipment and they come down to the D.C. area, and then they cross the Potomac. They're in Virginia. They're being trained, but they're not really going on any large campaign marches. And that's important. And early on, a couple months later, they're assigned to Harper's Ferry. They have seen no action. They haven't been under the fire of the enemy yet, and they're put at Harper's Ferry. Lee decides to invade Maryland, and he wants to go up to Pennsylvania. And before he can do that, he thinks we got to get rid of this Union garrison that's going to be behind us, threatening our supply lines at Harper's Ferry. So he sends Stonewall Jackson down there. He splits his army to take care of Harper's Ferry so they can continue their way north. 126th New York, who's only been trained in garrison, they're put on Maryland Heights. Whoever controls Maryland Heights is basically going to control Harper's Ferry because it sits in a bowl. You've got Loudon Heights and Bolivar Heights. 111th is going to be put on Bolivar Heights, and then a little bit closer to in between the town and Bolivar Heights. So you've got these two regiments. They're in these tactically important positions with virtually no experience. And you've got Stonewall Jackson's corps bearing down on them. The 39th New York is also there. They've been fighting throughout the war. You can tell by the number, 39th. Been around for a while. You didn't know that. If you look at the regiment's number, you sort of tell how long they've been in service. The larger the number, the less service. They didn't show up until probably midway through the war. Like so, on Maryland Heights, 2 brigades out of Jackson's corps are going to attack the 126th. It's going to be the brigade of Joseph Kershaw and William Barksdale. Lee Camp Sherrill is their commander. They are putting up pretty stiff opposition to Jackson's men, but they're going to be pushed back. When they start to get pushed back, Cheryl is wounded. And not only is wounded, he's wounded through the mouth. And he loses a bunch of teeth. His tongue gets all cut up. He can't speak. He can't speak, can't issue orders. And his young troops sort of lose confidence. Who's in charge now? Nobody's telling us to do anything. Again, command and control is important in every battle from 1861 to 1865. And it's frequently the cause of major defeats. There is no command and control at this point because the commander can't talk. So the 126th is going to pull back from Maryland Heights into the garrison of Harper's Ferry. 111th is going to be knocked back. Eventually the Confederates are going to ring these hills and ridges with their cannon, and they're going to open up with their cannon. And they're going to issue an ultimatum. You don't surrender, we're going to keep firing at you, and I don't think you're going to survive. So, the garrison commander is Colonel Clinton. Dixon. I knew it wasn't Nelson. Dixon Miles. And he gets together with the other commanders and they decide they're going to surrender Harper's Ferry. Before he can formally surrender it, and I think it helps him out, because I couldn't remember his first name. If he lives, I'll know his first name. He gets killed. But it's a stain that this garrison surrendered. And he would have been drummed out of the army. He'd have been court-martialed, I believe, just based on the animosity the rest of the army had of just the other regiments who were acting under orders from above to surrender. And so this brigade that we're talking about here, 3/4 of them, that's how they start their army career. That's how they start their war record. They're surrendering at Harper's Ferry. So, they are paroled. And what that means is, you don't get out of prison and get to go home, not to be tried again. It means you go to a camp, and they take everybody's name, get sent to a camp, a northern camp for the northern soldiers, and then once the Union Army captures and paroles a number of Confederates, they sort of exchange those. Not physically, but they exchange the numbers, and they're off parole at that point. They can rejoin the army and fight. When you're on parole, you're not supposed to do anything military-wise, and you're definitely not supposed to fight. So, it's not Willards Brigade at this time. It's under another fellow, Fox? Yeah, I think his name is Fox. No, Ford, yeah. I already got those. So they march from Harper's Ferry to Annapolis, and then they take trains to Camp Douglas in Illinois. So they actually end up in Illinois in the late fall of 1862. And they're in this nasty camp. Some POWs that actually occupied it previous to them. Wasn't very well kept. That's where they are. And there's a lot of consternation there. There's some other soldiers from completely different units that are stationed there. They've also been paroled. They're waiting their turn to come back into war. And they see these men, and they know what happens at Harper's Ferry. And one of them says, there's the Harper's Ferry Tower. And that's how they get the nickname that's going to stick with them until this point in the war. Everybody with me so far? I didn't mention it earlier, but any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer, or I'll tell us my you know, Mike, if you haven't met Six Quinces Lentz or seen him, he's smarter than I am. I know that for a fact. He's a smart guy, and I can only hope to know all the things he forgot. He really is. He's going to be a guide one day. Just wait. Bide his time for these yahoos to offer the test. So, enough of my... He didn't even pay me to say that either. Enough of my Mike Lentz promotion. So that's where they're at. This brigade is at Camp Douglas, and they're waiting their turn. Finally, they do get paroled. And they're going to make their way down to D.C. with the garrison around Washington, D.C. Willard is going to be put in charge of them. So he is their brigade. Now, I believe, no, excuse me. They're going to move out to Centerville, and Alexander Hayes is going to be put in charge of them. Again, Alexander Hayes suffered a wound at 2nd Manassas. He's in D.C. recuperating from the wound. And they get unlucky by having to surrender with no training at Harper's Ferry. when they're in garrison, they get very lucky that Alexander Hayes becomes their brigade commander. Because that guy knows what he's doing. He's been through fights. The West Pointer, and he's the guy that's going to train them. That's when he starts. So they cross the river, they move over to Centerville, and they're in garrison there. There's not a whole lot going on. I had 2 aunts that lived in Centerville when I was a kid. Maybe they visited them. That's when they are at the conclusion of the Battle of Chancellorsville, and Lee decides to come north. So Lee's going to come north. Of course, Hooker wants all the soldiers he can get as he's coming north. So he's trying to snatch everything he can. And these men of Hayes' brigade at this point, they're watching the Army of the Potomac march by them. And they're just hoping that they can join up and go. Because that's the only way they can redeem themselves, is to get in a fight and show their mettle. And so they're watching as the Army's passing by. And there's this reorganization within the 2nd Corps. Darius Couch was the previous Corps commander. After Chancellorsville, he refused to serve under Joseph Hooker. He resigns, gets up here in Pennsylvania, taking care of some troops up here. Hancock gets moved up. He becomes the Corps commander. They need the division commander. They're going to pull Alexander Hayes from this brigade and make him the division commander. So now, this is when George Lamb takes over as brigade commander. Everybody with all that movement. So here at Gettysburg, we have Hancock, Hayes, Willard. Within Willard, we got the 39th, 111th, 125th, 126th. All right. They are going to move up here. And I believe they joined the Army of the Potomac on the 28th. We know what happens that day. That's the day they get a brand new commander in the Army of the Potomac, George Meade. That's the day that Lee finds out that they're above the Potomac, they're at Frederick, and he's calling his troops back together. So they joined the Army of the Potomac on the 28th, and they start their movement up here. On the 29th, no, it's the 30th, they march. Everybody talks about the 6th Corps arriving here early morning, or starting their march early morning, July 2nd, arriving here early afternoon, July 2nd. They march over 30 miles. Everybody familiar with that? Just a long march. Willards Brigade on the 30th marches about 32, 33 miles. And keep in mind, this brigade is not used to being on campaign. They've been drilling. You have a nice flat field. You get your formations together, left flank, right flank, forward march, and all that. You're just doing that on a parade ground. So in the heat of battle, it becomes remote memory. As soon as you hear the command, you know what to do, and you don't have to think about it. That's a whole lot different than marching 33 miles up here over hill and dale through fields and whatnot, and it's hot. It's hot. So when they arrive to their camp, there's hardly anybody there because they've all fallen out, but they all catch up. Big accordion. And so they're going to rest a little bit on the 1st, and they're going to pick up their stuff, and they are going to march up here on July 2nd, or that evening, July 1st. They're going to be in the area of Big Round Top somewhere. At that point, on the early morning of July 1st, very early, John Gary's division of the 2nd Corps is on the north slope of Little Round Top. So in between us and them, you got a division of the 12th Corps, and then it's Hancock's men further down the line around the Round Top. Gary's men are going to move out, and Meade's going to tell Hancock to extend his line up here on Cemetery Ridge. That's when Hayes is going to get his division up here, and they are going to be in this area. And they're going to set up and then start doing whatever they're doing to build breastworks. We mentioned that they will be over here. Any questions so far? Go ahead.
Being so new to the Army, were they actually assigned their Corps badge before they got back?
You know the answer to that. No, they weren't. So they don't even have time to get, everybody knows what the Corps badge is? Anybody don't know? What we're talking about. So when you ride along and you see them, not this one, various monuments. Right there. See how that's shaped like a clover leaf? You'll see the clover leaf. A lot of monuments when we walk down here, that's their Corps badge. So each of the 7 Corps has a badge. 1st Corps is a circle, 3rd Corps is a diamond, theirs is a clover leaf. So that's put on their hat, And for each division, it's different color. First division's white, second division red, third division's blue. And that's so you can be identified in the heat of battle, at least which corps and division you're coming from, and it was a sense of esprit de corps. And that's courtesy of Joseph Hooker. He comes up with this plan in January of 1863. Anybody here in the Army? Been in the Army? No Army vets? One. How about Marines? No Marines? Air Force. Oh, all right. No Marines? Or you're a Marine? Oh. Bring your crayons with you?
What do you think I was going to eat on the road trip?
I completely understand. Let me ask you, do you buy the box that has the neat little sharpener in the back?
Well, they took that away from me because it kept hurting me.
Ah, I got it. I asked about that because in the Army, everybody knows what the 82nd patch looks like. Hey, Screaming Eagle, Band of Brothers and all that. That's where it starts. It starts in January of 1863. These patches that identify units. And I tried to tell my young soldiers when I was there, this is where this patch mess comes from. It comes from the Civil War. I tried. All right, are we off now? We go. Go ahead. I just want to go back and drink beer and waste their money. I was a private. I understand. I used to do the same thing. So, but they haven't even had time to get their corps badge and such. So they're just up there. The campaigning is totally new. It won't be new after this. So they get up here. You look out that way, the tree might be in your way. When you look out there, you can see some trees. It looks like an orchard out there. The grass is slightly lighter in color. That is the area of the Bliss farm. William Bliss owned a farm out there. It was a house and a barn. If you go out there, you can see the remnants of the bank that went up into the actual barn. So that's the Bliss, B-L-I-S-S, farm. And Confederates, after that first day's fight, everything moved south of the town. Confederates are going to be lining up over there on Seminary Ridge. And they see the old barn out there, and they're going to send some men out there to get in the upper reaches of the structures out there because they can shoot from there to the Union line up here. So they start firing at Hayes' line. So Hayes has got to send men out there to get rid of this crap. This is all in the morning of July 2nd. So there's a lot of skirmishing going on out there. And he's going to send, I should make note, the 39th is here, but the 39th is only 4 companies. They've been consolidated. Again, they've been in the war for the last 2 years. Attrition has taken hold, so they don't have as many men as these other 3 regiments. So they're consolidated just down to 4 companies.
Are those companies like the average size, or are they bigger?
They're the average size, I think, yeah. Because their total numbers over 200. So he's going to send the 39th out there. So let me backtrack a little bit because I get the storytelling and I forget some things like I always do. All right, this is from The Life and Letters of Alexander Hayes. So these are his letters. This was published in 1919. Here is a letter to his father-in-law, John McFadden. He married John's daughter, Annie. That was his wife's name. He writes to John McFadden, January 27th, 1863. Goes blah, 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 blah. Again, I am ordered from headquarters to inspect my post at Centerville on the 31st. This will require me to defer my trip to Washington until the 1st of February. We are all well and enjoy ourselves. The exercise I am required to take invigorates me. The exercise he's required to take take command of this brigade has been changed. My lameness has almost entirely disappeared. So far I have no assurance that my command will stand fire, but I am assured by all the officers that improvements are daily perceptible, both in the morale and discipline of the men. Although the brigade has been identified with one of the most disgraceful surrenders of the war and suffers corresponding sense of humiliation, I have full confidence that in time the war cry of Harper's Ferry will incite them to revive the deeds of older and more fortunate soldiers. So that's what he thinks about this new command that he's about to take charge of. All right, so the 39th is going to push out towards the Bliss Farm. This comes from a paper called Democrat in America. It's a New York newspaper. This was published July 14th, Tuesday morning, July 14th. And it's from our correspondent from the 126th Regiment. And he writes this from 2 taverns near Gettysburg, July 6th. He writes, at the commencement of the battle, our Brigadier General Alexander Hayes was in command of the division, and Colonel Willard of the 125th New York was in command of the brigade. The 39th New York Garibaldi Guards were thrown out after a little as skirmishers and met rebel skirmishers who were thrown out of the woods in which the rebels lay in the valley between. They lost considerably from rebel sharpshooters who picked off our skirmishers and especially officers of skirmishers during the whole fight. At one time, the 39th retreated, but General Hayes rode rashly down the line and rallied them, and they held their ground well. So at one point, it's sort of famous with this unit up here. The 39th is starting to pull back, but they haven't been told to be pulled back. Watch this fellow runs here. Let's just be mindful of people using our little sidewalk here. Hayes gets on his horse. Anybody on a horse at Gettysburg is a target. But he gets on his horse and he rides out there with the flag himself. He's trying to rally these men and get them to stay out there because they're starting to panic and fall back. So this is a vastly different situation than what they had at Harper's Ferry, when the guy meant to rally them gets his mouth blown off and he can't do anything. So they are lucky by who they have. I didn't go back and talk about Frederick, the previous commander of the 39th. He is from Italy, Garibaldi Guards, that's an Italian term, so he's been through the wars over there. He's over here fighting, and he's a little shifty. So he seems to be getting more money than the Army's paying him. And people catch on to it, and they're going to relieve him of command, and he actually gets court-martialed, and he's sent to Sing Sing in New York for a year. So that's how Hugo Hildebrand is now their commander, because the previous guy's hanging out in Sing Sing. Whether you get killed or not, I'd rather be here. I'll be in Sing Sing. So that's about the 39th. Again, there's a lot of skirmishing going on out here. Moving down the line. All right. Now, I'm going to forget to tell the story, but I'm going to jump to the third. All right? Because when we get down there, I'm not going to remember all this, and I think it's a pretty cool story. The third comes. There's been this back and forth skirmishing over the farm out there. Alexander Hayes gets tired of it. He wants to burn the place down. You see, it's not there anymore. It got burnt down. So, his men are out there. He has a unit from New Jersey, a unit from Connecticut out there. And he asked for volunteers for somebody to go out there and tell them to burn the places down. Nobody raises their hand. First thing you learn in basic training from other people that are there, never volunteer for anything. And that goes back to 1863. Do not volunteer. I can tell you a story about the one time I volunteered and I was a staff sergeant. I said, you see me raise my hand, you raise your hand. And I'm talking to fire. Because I'm not going to raise my hand for any crap detail. It's going to be good. See me raise my hand, raise your hand. Can we get some people to do this? And I look back and nobody, you're lost. So what was I raising my hand for? Baggage detail. To load the plane to fly back from Iraq on R&R. Baggage detail got to sit in first class. And that's a long flight to sit like this, no matter where you're going. So I got first class. Dumb Joes, what are you doing back there? I was going to raise your hand. So, sorry for my diversion. But Alexander Hayes wants to burn that down because it's problematic. They keep shooting at his men and stuff, and he's losing men out there. Just needs to get rid of the whole thing. So he asked once for a volunteer. He asked the second time. A fellow in the 111th New York, Charles Hitchcock. I'll do it. He tells him, go out there, tell them to burn the place down. And once it's done, you can come back. So he goes out there, they get it lit on fire, and he comes back, but the guys don't come back. No, tell them to come back. He goes back out there again, and they're shooting at him. Thankfully, they don't hit him for whatever reason, and he gets them to come back. The place burns down. So a guy from the 111th Addressing Gettysburg Regiment, runs out there and lets him know. Sometime, I think it was after the war maybe, somebody said, you know, he deserved a medal for it. And then somebody finally puts him in for a Medal of Honor award. I think it's 1892 he gets awarded the Medal of Honor. One of 64 recipients, but that's a 30-year wait for something you clearly deserved a medal for. The fella down there lost his leg, didn't have to wait for 1892. I'm not going to mention his name. He got the Medal of Honor. So, question. All right, so.
Why didn't they just blow it up with artillery? That's point blank range.
You got your men there too. You don't want that. It is point blank range, and that's what happens to the Sherford barn. He gets hit by artillery, catches fire on the 3rd. But you've got your men there too. What's sad is Bliss doesn't get any money for his farm. The rule was if the Confederates destroyed your property, the government, the U.S. government said, well, we didn't do it. We don't owe you. Sometimes you still get a little bit. In this case, it's the U.S. Army burning down his farm, his buildings. So they tried, and eventually he realized this fields are his world. Married out there, he needs to sell. He's not going to make it. So that nasty Kaduri farm, people, they bought it up at low price. Took over his farm. So nobody related to Kaduri, but that's what happens to him. If you go out, there's a famous picture from spring of 1918, when that is Camp Hope, where Captain Dwight Eisenhower was training young soldiers how to use these light French tanks. There's a picture of a tank up on a bank. That's the bank that went into the barn, the second level of the barn. You ever see that? It's kind of neat. Question? Okay. Go, yeah, no. Okay. So they're sitting here. We're back to the second. Two structures out there stand all day through the second. There's a lot of firing back and forth. Willard's men are up here. Sickles has been told when he's out there, and Meade realizes he's not going to be able to stay out there. Everybody but Sickles realizes he's not going to be able to stay out there. Hancock makes the famous quote, you know, when he goes out there, everybody's amazed at how beautiful it looks. So just wait a little while, they'll come tumbling back. And they do. But Sickles was told, you can ask for any of the reserve artillery you need for support, and you can ask for 5th Corps, and they're going to designate a division, it's Caldwell's division, to go help them out also. And Sickles is going to need all that help. But that line is breaking. And it starts rolling up from south to north. Kershaw starts attacking the part of the Peach Orchard. About 6 o'clock, William Barksdale is going to unleash his brigade, and they are going to knock Union troops out of the Peach Orchard fairly quickly. When they do that, the attack keeps rolling up the line. Caldwell's division's already been stripped from the end of Hancock's line, sent to the wheat field. There is a gaping hole now in the Union line, and you have a brigade of Mississippians headed towards that hole. Hancock's up here riding around. He goes to Brigadier General Alexander Hayes. He says, I need you to send somebody down there. And Hayes does not hesitate. He tells George Willard to take his brigade down there. Now their brigade is probably back over here somewhere. Because like all this land, if you go over there, you're hidden. All right, so you're hidden from view. So they're not all out here. But he finds Willard and he sends them down there. Or he assigns them to Hancock. Hancock's going to lead them down this part of the way. Hancock's going to show them where he wants them to go. But they're going down there because you got this giant hole in the Union line because the last of Sickles' men are falling back. That's Humphrey's division. Humphrey's division, and he's the only military trained higher up in Sickles. He's got Birney, Sickles, Humphrey. Neither Birney nor Sickles has ever been military trained. Humphreys is the only one. Apparently Sickles never confers with Humphrey. Is this a good spot? No. Confers with everybody else, begging somebody to tell him it's a good spot. Once Humphrey's division gets outflanked by Barksdale, they start to fold and pull back. You've got this giant gaping hole that needs to be filled. Hancock is going to take Willard's brigade from here down there, and we'll talk about down there when we get there.
Two things I forgot. For those of you who've been worrying, the stickers have arrived. We also need to get a head count. So when we go down, if we could just stay on this path, and we're going to be waiting at the Bryan house there, and we're going to hand you a sticker, and that's also going to be how we count. Okay, now our count's starting off.
I love my stickers. I love the stickers.
More importantly, if this man should fall, who will pick up the colors? Sir, thank you very much. All right, so that's the guy. When you're ready to let go, let me know and I'll find him. Okay? All right.
All right, you done? All right, so it is it's about 17, 19 before 11. The artillery thing is going to start at 11. Again, stay off the road. I don't want to interfere with anybody else because I don't want anybody giving him grief over these tours. And those of y'all have been with us for years, it seemed like the park police would show up right at the beginning of the tour because they're dying to give people tickets. So we're good with that, but I don't want anybody to go complain, hey, we had this giant group, they had a big flag, don't know who they were, but they interfered with them. By the time we get down there, it should be a little bit past 11, they'll have started. And we're going to go behind the Pennsylvania Monument and a little bit further down. I'll try to talk. I don't want to interfere with what people are experiencing with the artillery unit down there, but maybe I'll get in the middle and talk. As soon as they're done, we're going out into the weeds. We're going out to that marker, and it's britches. There you go. So that's the plan. Questions, anybody? Yes, sir. They do. Yeah, I was going to read that down there. Now, the 3rd Division of the 2nd Corps, including the 126th Regiment, heard at length the welcome order. And this is when they're getting ready to move. Fixed bayonets, shoulder arms, left face, forward march, and instantly moved rapidly for a mile southward toward Round Top, and inward face westward toward a shallow ravine grown up with trees and bushes. The 39th New York were held in reserve, but the rest of the brigade, namely the 125th on the left, 126th in the center, and the 111th on the right, were marched down there. But then, that's later. So, my point with this is, they fix bayonets before they leave this position. They're walking down there with bayonets on top of their thing. As an old master sergeant, you don't give privates bayonets and march around a lot for any length of time because accidents happen. I assume everybody arrived down there safe and sound. The other thing is, it's harder to load their weapons with a bayonet on top. So they have that struggle. But when they get down here, and you will see they'll exercise a charge into that thicket, bayonets are going to come in handy. So somebody has the foresight to order them to fix bayonets, probably Hayes, before they go down there. This is a letter from Lieutenant R. Bassett. He was with the 126th. Part of the letter reads, "Toward night the battle raged furiously. The rebels got the best of us and captured one of our batteries. Our brigade was ordered to retake it. We drew up in line of battle and charged across the ravine, which is covered with thick growth of trees and bushes, and up the hill to the other side and took the battery under a terrific fire of grape, canister, shell, driving the rebels off a point of bayonet a great deal of time within one rod of them, our comrades, bless you, falling thick and fast around us." So that shows you the value of having them fix bayonets because they don't have time when they get down there. Eventually, and we'll deal with it when, I'll explain how we get to this eventuality. Lieutenant Colonel James M. Bull of the 126 is going to be the brigade commander. Usually a colonel would move up. If your higher up gets out, we'll talk about all that, and we'll explain how Lieutenant Colonel James Bull is eventually in charge of this brigade. In his official report from July 8, 1863, he writes, "About 4 p.m. by order of the division general, the brigade moved from its position by the left flank about a quarter of a mile Towards the left of the line, where it was formed in line of battle and ordered by Colonel Willard to charge 2 rebel batteries supported by infantry, posted on a hill in front of the position occupied by the brigade. What happens is when Barksdale's men knock Sickles' men out of the peach orchard, and all the cannon that Sickles had there falls back towards the Trossel farm and further up the ridge. E. Porter Alexander, he's running the Confederate artillery over there at this point. He moves his guns up. He does what is called an artillery charge. The artillery is moving up as the infantry is moving up, and it's his dream situation. All gun chiefs back then, we don't get to do it anymore. If we do, we're in trouble. Back then, they love doing this because things are going well, and they're using the guns the way they want to. So he runs immediately his guns up to the Emmitsburg Road and the peach orchard. So it's not, they don't wait till the next day or anything to occupy the peach orchard with guns. It happens as soon as the Union Army's forced out of there and they can get their guns there. And these are the guns that they're talking about in these reports. Alexander's gun line that he's trying to establish from the peach orchard up the Emmitsburg Road. When they say they are going out there to try to recapture Union guns, most likely it's Turnbull's battery. He's got a battery out there that's separated. There's 3 guns that have been overrun by Confederate forces. Willards Brigade can see those guns, and they're going to try to get them back. They will get them back. Confederates aren't going to be able to pull them off the field. So those are the guns they keep referencing. Clinton McDougal from the 111th would write, on Thursday evening, July 2nd, when the 3rd Brigade, 3rd Division, 2nd Corps marched down to the left of Cemetery Hill to reinforce the 3rd Corps, as I was afterwards informed. He doesn't even know who was reinforcement down there. That's interesting to me. He knows somebody broke, but at this point, and he's writing this in August, well, it's after the fact. By August, he doesn't realize his reinforcement broke. Somebody. Brigade commander ordered me to remain at the left in reserve about 200 yards in the rear when General Hancock came riding up shortly and ordered me with my regiment to the right in great haste to charge the rebel advance. I'm reading this to you now in case we don't have time when we get down there. But I'll reiterate it when we get down there. All right, questions? I've delayed here in the shade all I can. Thanks for reminding me of that, Rich. Yes, sir.
Is there any documentation for the last thing that he reported the second road?
Oh, how come you didn't ask me that? What's your first name? Matt. One question, Matt. That's all he needs. That's always a good one. That's always a good one, yeah. When they picked Willard to go down there and support the flank that's falling apart, he tells Willard, go down there and knock the hell out of him. Knock the hell out of him. Thank you, sir. He tells him, go down there and knock the hell out of him. And I gotta tell you, not to ruin the end of the story, exactly what they do. They go down there and knock the hell out of him. So, all right. I've held to the shade as long as I can. We did half the tour in the shade. 50%, that's all we can ask in this world. So, questions, anybody, before we move along? Same deal, let's stay to the left of all the monuments, to the left of the road. We're going to go behind the Pennsylvania Monument, and they'll definitely be doing the artillery thing by the time we get down. All right? This is from Reporter Captain Aaron Seeley, 111th, New York. Fish report. During the movement to the right, we were under heavy fire of shell and canister from the batteries of the enemy. This is after they moved out. With the bullets of a triumphant horde of rebels who had forced their way up to the position previously held by others of our Union forces, who had been compelled to give way before their attack, with the loss of 4 of our cannon. At the command, the regiment with the brigade, not a man in the whole line faltering or hesitating for an instant, hurled themselves upon the advancing foe. The rebel ranks were broken through as they hurriedly retreated. Volley after volley was poured tie them into our advancing regiment. The ground over which first the charge was made, which we're going to make as soon as these guys get done, was a sort of swale covered with rocks, thickly interspersed with bushes, scrub oak, and trees. Beyond was open ground ascending towards the west, ascending up to the road, the Gettysburg Road. As we emerged from the open ground, we were met by a terrible storm of grape and canister. Without an instant's hesitation, the regiment still advanced until they had driven the enemy from the position of the 4 cannon previously captured by the rebels. Again, the cannon that he's talking about firing grape and canister towards him, that's Alexander's guns that they had moved up. I think probably Thompson's battery, if my memory serves, rushed his guns up there. And the guns they're trying to recapture are Turnbull's guns. When the 126th and 125th go forward, they are going to run into Barksdale's men. That's the brigade in front of them in the swale. To Willards Brigade's right and Barksdale's left is another Confederate brigade under Cadmus Wilcox. You've got Alabamians. They are coming as far as in echelon attack. After Willards Brigade knocks Barksdale's brigade back and stops them, they're rushing forward, but now they're being threatened on their right rear by Wilcox's brigade. That's when the 111th over here is going to move up, and they're sort of going to turn toward the northwest and engage with the 10th Alabama of Wilcox's brigade. Then, the 1st Minnesota, we'll talk for another day, is going to come in on the 111th right, and they're going to engage Cadmus Wilcox. So it gives you the sense, Hancock brings Willards Brigade down here, stop those men that are coming this way, and he sees men over here. There's still a gap to Willard's right that he has to fill. That's when Hancock moves up the line. Whose regiment is this? Colville's, the Minnesotans, and he sends them in there to try to stop Wilcox's momentum. Everybody with me on the sequence of events? I wish I was out there reading all this, but if I don't read it here, it ain't gonna get read. One of the worst things about these tours, probably the only bad thing, as soon as I get in my car, it'll come to me. I meant to talk about that. I really wanted to talk about that. And I'll think about that for the rest of the day. I did a recording with Matt yesterday about for the anniversary. We talked about July 2nd. Get in my car going home. I wish I'd have said this, because this is what I meant. It wasn't in my head. In my head going home. So I think next month what we're going to do is I'm going to conduct the tour from my car going home. I'm going to drive up here. Everybody have me on speakerphone. I'll tell you where to walk, and I won't forget anything. It'll work just fine. So, all right. This comes from Major Richardson. He is with the, I believe, 126. He's writing to John Batchelder in 1868. Part of his letter is, Colonel Willard marched to the left to the rear of a swale of near a body of bushes or wood. This swale then in our front was about 20 or 15 rods wide, grown up with thick bushes, and in some places were old stumps and large rocks or rough boulders. The enemy had driven back the Excelsior Brigade, and the men were running back before the enemy as if they were but a line of skirmishers. The enemy had full possession of the swale and commenced firing on us on our arrival of our brigade. We were fronted, bayonets having been fixed upon starting, and with loaded guns charged the enemy. A short but terrible contest ensued in the bushes and the swale, but the brigade continued to advance until they reached the open field on the other side, where we had come so persistently on the enemy who had contested every inch of ground. That large numbers of them at the very points of our bayonets threw down their arms, lay down in ranks, over whom we advanced, scarcely able to step without treading upon them. The 125th and 111th were halted. The 126th, however, kept on half up the hill toward the little house where the enemy had guns planted and past our guns, which had fallen into the enemy. The rebel artillery pouring deadly fire into us all the well. I think they're headed towards the Klingel farm or the Rogers farm, which is no longer standing, but that's the direction they're going. And I should have said this in the beginning. We are standing here because we're going to walk over there. Willards Brigade is strung out down here. So does everybody know where United States Avenue is? It comes past the Trossel Barn from the Emmitsburg Road, and it makes its way down here to intersect with Hancock Avenue. That's a modern War Department road, of course, put in so people can navigate in their cars. The original Trossel Lane, as you're coming this way down United States, you're at the Trossel Farm. Right after you get past the house, there is a horse path that goes off to the right. That's the original Trossel Lane. And so they put United States Avenue there, and then they start putting in the monuments, and they're treating that as if that was Trossel Lane, when that road is actually further north in the original Trossel Lane. Is everybody with me? Yeah. So all the monuments down there get shifted towards the north a little bit, so they get sort of shifted out of place a little bit. The Gilvery's line, which is all the cannon you see down there, they're further that way. I think it was 2 years ago we did the one evening tour we've ever done. It was in August, so it was a nice time to do an evening tour. It wasn't that hot. But we followed the 21st Mississippi. And they come down through there and they capture Malbone Watson's battery. I think it's Battery I, 5th U.S. Artillery. Watson's markers are there because they're north of the road. The road wasn't there at the time of the battle. They actually should be north of the Trossel Lane, which they are, but I think they're too far north because they got placed north of the road. Here, we are standing at the very right flank of Willards Brigade. It'd be the right flank of the 111. So all the action, where they're coming down through the swale, getting ate up by canister and grape in front of them, the Confederate artillery, it's further to my left. So just keep in mind, everything is further that way. And everything got shifted with these monuments and stuff because United States Avenue got put in. Veterans wrote back, we were north of the lane, and I don't know if people assumed that road was the lane, or they're just going to have to put it north of that road because the road's there now. But everything got moved this way a little bit. If you go over there and you look at where the original Trossel Lane was, it runs up on a ridge. I bet Malbone Watson's men were probably up near that ridge. There's our second. That's high ground, and that's where you want to be firing at the enemy that's coming towards you. Rather than, he's on a sort of a hill there now, but he was further south. Willards Brigade stretched out that way. We're on the very right edge of Willards Brigade, so we're not in the center.
What's the departure actually? Is it 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards?
Well, the 111th is about 200 yards behind the 126th, off to the right. 39th is over here, about the same, off to the left.
So when you're getting down there to USA, I think you said everything should actually envision everything being further southward.
Yeah, they're,
By about how much?
Willards Brigade, they're left close to the George Wagner Farm, which is sitting on the corner there. So, what I'm talking about stretches off there. But if you're standing there at that intersection, Malbone is out here, whereas Malbone should be over here. So, it is. You could have went down there. Anybody want to? Okay. But I want to go out to this marker. My intention was to go through the thicket and go out to the advance marker. There's an advance marker for Willards Brigade out on the Emmitsburg Road. Nobody ever goes out there. That's what we're about. Going places nobody else goes. But the thicket is not a thicket. The thicket is a forest. So Matt and I came up with this brilliant idea yesterday. Again, I'm not big on brilliant ideas. I'm not a big thinker. But I said, hey, let's get the beavers and take them from where they are, send them on vacation to the thicket, let them stay about a month or two there and do their thing, and then send them back home. Paid for entirely by the government, free vacation, and then go back home. And then we got our thicket cleared, and then next year we can walk through there into the advanced market. So we'll see what the Park Service has to say about that. All right. I'll continue here before we walk out there. This is the same fella, Richardson, riding further on. He writes, the 126 halted, threw out its right and left general guides in the colors. Halted throughout left and right guides and colors rest on the line. Then about face, and marched back in quick time towards us and measured step to the swale. But while returning, we drew off the guns which had previously fallen into the enemy's hands. That's probably Turnbull's guns that are out here. 3 guns that the left of Barksdale and the right of Wilcox have overrun. They're bringing those 3 guns back to the right. When they get so far out and they realize there's really no infantry support around them, and Alexander's guns are tearing into them, they can't stay out there. And that's why they turn around and go back. What they've done is accomplished their mission, though. The Confederates in this area do not get to this ridge. They plugged this hole left open because of what Sickles does over there. Our charge through the swale was made with the 111th somewhere on our right, 39th on our left rear, the 125th connecting with the 126th on its left. General Barksdale was trying to hold his men, cheering them and swearing. Directly in front of the left of the 126th, near the right of the 125th, who both saw and heard him as they emerged from the bushes, and immediately several from both regiments fired at him, and he fell by several bullets, and a corporal in my company, which was next to the left, passed over his body while advancing up the hill. So these 2 regiments out in front see Barksdale, a bunch of rifles pointed at him, shoot it, and they take him down. And we know his body eventually, I assume we know, his body is eventually taken back to the Hummelball farm down here near the Tawnytown Road, and that's where he's going to be buried so his wife comes up here. Yeah. Have you ever heard the ghost story about Hummelball? The only ghost story I know. So, another version. I hope y'all don't mind. He's buried in the yard, and then sometime later his wife, his widow down in Mississippi, raises enough money to come exhume the body, and they're going to take it back south. She brings his favorite dog up when she comes to get William's body. They get the body, put it in the casket, do whatever they got to do for transport, and they're ready to go. The dog won't leave the grave. They got to go. It's time to go. They end up leaving the dog there. And the dog wouldn't eat or drink. It just sat by the grave howling. And so they leave. The dog dies. The story is they bury the dog in the grave. Show up July 2nd, presumably at night, because there's ghost rules. We got union rules. Ghosts don't show up during the day. Presumably you hang out there July 2nd at night and you hear the dog howling. I don't know. I've never heard the dog. You know, if bits and pieces of that are true, I always wondered maybe they took the wrong body back home. That dog knows they got the wrong body. So maybe Barksdale's still open. I don't know if they opened the box up when they got home. So, it's only a ghost story. I don't want to know. So, all right, here's what the Mississippians had to say. And this is from the Mississippi Historical Society. This particular volume was published in 1914. This is a soldier writing in there. We left the barn and the brigade moved to the orchards towards the heights. So the barn they're talking about is the Sherfy barn over there on the Emmitsburg Road. The heights are this way. Still driving the enemy before them, General Barksdale encouraged the men by shouting, "Forward, men, forward," which was the only command I ever heard him give after a battle commenced. By this time, we were under heavy fire of 2 lines of battle, and their artillery and our losses had been very heavy. And recognizing the impossibility of breaking these fresh lines of battle, we fell back to the orchard where we spent the night. The fresh lines of battle they encounter are Willards Brigade. J.C. Lloyd of the 13th Mississippi would write, "Our colonel stepped briskly a little further to the front, said, 'Attention, fix bayonets, forward march.'" Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Somebody's plagiarized here. I don't know if it's Willard or it's Barksdale, but one of them plagiarized. "Double quick march, charge bayonets," and the great battle was raging. Oh, that horrible dream. Did we hear shot, shell, and canister, see men falling all around us, and still live through it? Was it a battle or a severe storm? Scarcely a minute, and we are at the barn, scaling the fences at the lane and right across and among the enemy, literally running over them. A divergence to the left. When Barksdale crossed the Emmitsburg Road, he has the 17th, 13th, and 18th regiments. The 21st is going to go off on their own. But these 3 regiments are going to turn to the left. They are conforming with Lee's plan to keep their left on the Emmitsburg Road and drive to the northeast. A divergence to the left, and we run over and capture a battery. Then a divergence to the right. They've turned back this way to face a force not yet driven back. Then on and on until no enemy was seen in our front. Then still on to Plum River. And did our gallant Barksdale ride into the mist and still say forward through the bushes? Did I hear him make a sound and see men rush to him? See him taking off his horse and started off the field? I turn again to the front and see the enemy bursting through the bushes and firing on us. They had come out on the top of the hill and fresh. A shock as if I had a rail in my left hand and one end that struck the ground. I sat down with the other hand to show surrender. That line marches over me, and I down into the bushes to find a rest for my arm and for protection from further damages. He's talking about Barksdale's brigade. These are the fresh troops they see that are hitting. Questions? All right. What? Oh, what? I didn't see it.
Before charging in, right, the alignment that came down to 2 regiments in front, one to the right rear, one to the left rear. Was that because there were no other soldiers here? They had to put 2 regiments to protect their flanks? Or?
I think they're doing it for some sort of reserve.
Okay.
They don't, but they don't know how things are going to be out in front of them. I don't think it has anything to do with their flanks. I just think it's a reserve, and they're putting it to the right rear because, again, they don't know what's out in front of them, and they're going to use them. It's going to help the flanks, certainly. So, good question. Lynch never has a bad question. Why are you going to be a guide?
When they all move out, are they all moving out together, or do the 2 back ones hold up as reserves?
The 2 back ones sort of hold up. They're not going with the 2 front ones at first. It's a little bit later that they're going to call the 111th in. When we get up there and we can see that way, I'll talk about the 39th.
What's the frontage on these roads?
What's the frontage? About 100 yards, probably.
100 yards,
yeah.
not much more than that.
Okay. Yeah. Any more questions? Strong Vincent does up on Little Round Top. It's so extraordinary. He doesn't know who's giving him these orders. He's taking them on his responsibility. So, as we come in here, and again, for context, we are on the far right of the brigade line here. The line's going to stretch all the way that way, and further that on the other side of that monument is where the 39th goes in. And then right over here to our right, it's about 5 or 10 minutes after the 111th comes up, the 1st Minnesota is going to charge because there's still a gap here. And Cadmus, Wilcox, Alabamians are coming through here. So the Minnesotians are going to charge right up here, probably to the right of where the swale ends.
How many guys do we have between here and that monument for this attack?
For the brigade?
Yeah.
About 1,500.
So between here and that monument, that's a pretty thin line.
Yeah, it's still further that way.
Wow.
Yeah. So, questions?
Is Wilcox the end of Longstreet's assault?
No. And Wilcox is part of AP Hill's corps. It's Wilcox. Then next to Wilcox is David Lang's Floridians. Come next month, 3rd Saturday of the month, we'll talk about Lang's Floridians. Next to him, we have Ambrose Wright, we did 2 years ago. Next to him, you're supposed to have more Mississippians, Carnet Posey's Mississippians. But they get hung up around the Bliss Farm that's still standing on the evening. So it's only, I think, the 48th Mississippi that goes up on Wright's left flank. So when Wright falls back and he complains, I got up there and saw the whole infernal Yankee army, but I didn't have support on either side. Well, the Floridians have gotten knocked back, and he really doesn't have support on his left side because only 1 regiment, because the rest of them are tooling around the Bliss Farm still. So that's the progression. It peters off after Longstreet's corps, after they're done assaulting, because AP Hill's brigades don't go in double stack. There's no depth to the attack. It's 1 brigade, 1 brigade, 1 brigade, 1 brigade, rather than 1 brigade, then another one behind it. After Barksdale, and then behind him Walford, it reverts to AP Hill, and that's where things fall apart. So, questions? All right, let's continue. We have to go out right.
Oh, hey!
Hey! I just wanted to say hi. I want to say hi.
Why? Why would you ask missed that.
I didn't see it. I was worried. We've been in the sun for a long time. We had to go back and find you. I was going to send a detail. I was worried. All right. So, this comes from, again, the same newspaper I referenced earlier. This is a different edition. The Democrat and American from July the 16th. This is a letter that they published written from James Fulton of the 126th New York Regiment. The 126th of the 3rd Brigade stood their ground nobly, never flinching until ordered, the ranks being well thinned with a shower of balls which flew so thickly around us. A great many of our company were killed and wounded, they falling thick and fast. John Wilson was taken in the top of the head with a spent ball, which deprived him of his senses for about a couple hours. The color bearer, advancing a few feet from me, was shot dead. One of the color guard who took the colors was wounded. We drove the rebels steadily before us until Colonel Willard was shot dead on his horse. One of my boots was spoiled about this time by a ball or shell tearing off the sole and stinging my foot, so I thought it was knocked to pieces. I could not walk for about half an hour, but lay among a lot of rebels slain and wounded. A great many of our men were killed and wounded and left overnight. Our sergeant major was killed. He was a first-rate fellow. This comes from the regimental history of the 125th. It was written by their chaplain, Ezra Simons, published in 1888. He wrote, looking down at the fearful struggle at this had continued for 3 hours, and noting that the fire was creeping near where Humphrey's division was letting go of its hold upon the road, the writer was impressed that it could scarcely be possible that the 125th should much longer remain out of the heat of battle. So he passed along the line of men who at the time were lying on the ground and again urged them to be ready for the possibilities immediately before them. But he had not reached farther end of the regiment when the ominous command was heard, fall in. And rising the regiment within our brigade, took up the line of march by left flank down towards the scene of engagement, down into the fierceness of the fight, down into the jaws of death, to close these men with strong hands and noble forms of our men. The sun was sinking low and the heavens were ablaze with its splendors, in marked contrast with the lurid fires of death toward which we were marching. We were halted amid smoke in front of some swale, a new growth of trees, in which we could see dimly because of the smoke covering the field, men moving. The brigade was dressed on the colors, an unusual thing under such circumstances. Our men commenced to fire, but the word was shouted, firing on your own men, upon which the command was given by Colonel Willard, cease firing. Officers, as did the writer, rushed in front of our line repeating the order, but the interval permitted the enemy to reload, and we speedily learned our mistake. A man to the left of the writer fell in an instant, prostrate by a bullet. Let's see. So the Willards Brigade is going to pass through here. They've knocked Barksdale back. The 111th is going to veer over to, it'd be my left rear as I stand your right front. And again, they're engaging Cadmus Wilcox. Once they realize that position is not tenable up there and they start to fall back, that is when Colonel George Willard gets hit in the head by artillery shell and half his head and his face is blown off. So he's killed instantly and goes into the spot. And you can see how thick this is. I guess it'll always be thick at this time, but you can also see the large rock. I mean, I'm sure this rock is here in 1863. But this is the area where he gets killed. And let me go back. This is the official report from Alexander Hayes. He wrote this July 8, 1863. Colonel Willard, 125th New York Volunteers, commanding the 3rd Brigade, was early in the day withdrawn from the division by the Major General commanding and took a prominent part in the engagement on our left. The history of this brigade's operation is written in blood. Colonel Willard was killed, getting ahead of my story here, and the next day after the brigade had rejoined the division, his successor, Colonel Lycum Sherrill, 126 New York volunteers also failed. Colonel Clinton McDougal, he actually says Colonel Clinton Dougal McDougal, 111th New York volunteers, and Major Hugo Hillebrand, 39th New York volunteers, were each severely wounded, leaving the brigade in command of Lieutenant Colonel. That's James Bull. And that's how James Bull ends up writing the official report for the brigade. The loss of the brigade amounts to 1/2 the casualties of the division. The acts of traitors at Harper's Ferry had not tainted their patriotism. And that's almost half of his official report. So he doesn't write a lot of detail, but he spends a lot of time on his old brigade. And again, James Bull is elevated to brigade command. Now, when they're pulling back, nobody knows exactly what Willard intends to do. Is he just going back there, or is he going back up to Ziegler's Grove where we started? But he tells Sherrill and the other regimental commanders, he tells them something. Sherrill is now commanding the brigade. He thinks what Willard meant was to take them back up to Ziegler's Grove and reform behind the 3rd Division up there. And so that's what he does. Sherrill is taking his brigade up there. Hancock sees them withdrawing from the field. Hancock gets angry, because Hancock always gets angry. He says, what are you doing? You're leaving the field. He puts Sherrill under arrest and puts some other guy in charge of the brigade. So Sherrill is pulled off the scene at this point. This is the night of July 2nd. McDougal and some others go to Hancock and they say Sherrill was doing what he thought he was ordered. They're unsure if that's what Willard meant. McDougal writes after the war that he don't think that's what Willard meant, because Willard was a good tactician and he wouldn't have taken him all the way up there. He probably would have taken him back here, but he can't be sure. So they go to Hancock and say, you know, he shouldn't be under arrest. You know, let him back to the brigade. So the 3rd day comes, Pickett's charge. He does release him from arrest, but he's back over there behind where we were standing when we started the tour. Shell comes, Sherrill gets hit with shrapnel, and he dies the next day on July 4th. So there's a story. We get the story from McDougal. He's writing a letter to somebody else. Hancock is also wounded on the 3rd day. So he's pulled off the field, and he goes back home to recuperate somewhere. While he's recuperating, after the armies have left here, Alexander Hayes goes and visits Hancock. And Hancock says, and I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write it all down, if I can't find the original, I don't want to write it down. That's just how I am. A old librarian. But McDougal writes that during this conversation between Hayes and Hancock, Hancock asks Hayes, hey, whatever happened to that colonel in your division that I put under arrest? I ought to apologize to him. Hayes says he's dead. So that's the problem with you, Hancock. The apologies always come too damn late. You know why he could tell that to that corps commander? Went to West Point together. They've known a long time. Hayes knows what he's about. He can get away with that. To conclude our story here, so Sherrill is also killed here. Willard, of course, killed. McDougal's wounded. Hillebrand's wounded. But this brigade redeemed themselves, and they're going to go through the rest of the war. By the time of Appomattox, there's hardly any of these original men left, just because of attrition. In 1864, McDougal goes back to New York. He's up there recruiting, and he's recovering from wounds and stuff. He misses the Wilderness Campaign. He hears about it, and he hears about the devastation they're suffering, and he leaves that and comes back down to join his brigade because he didn't want them to go through it by themselves. But then he goes back to New York. So they're recruiting, getting more men into the regiments within the brigade throughout 1864. Most of the originals who signed up for 3 years, their time is spent either wounded, killed. Some just leave. You have these bounty jumpers that will sign up for 3 years, get a certain amount of money. 1864, Lincoln says he needs more men. And the thing is, you want to volunteer before you get drafted. If you volunteer, you'll get money. And New York was paying upwards of $1,000 for a volunteer. So you can get a pretty penny if you volunteer for 3 years. 2 years, I think it was, I don't know, 500. 1 year 300. So little did they know at that point, you sign up for $1,000, you only got half a year left. They don't know what's gonna end, but some would bounty jump, sign up, get their money, go join the regiment for a little, and then leave. A little while later, show up again, sign up, get some more money. So some of them surely did that, but most are gone at the end of the week. So, questions?
You mentioned before an advance marker.
Yeah.
How far forward did this brigade get? Is this
Gettysburg Road. They get it probably not the whole brigade. Again, you got one regiment way off over
So they
there.
went
The 11th is running. It's probably elements of the 126 get out there.
So they went through these woods
Yeah.
that way.
Well, yeah, there weren't woods back then, but yeah. And if you take North Sickles Avenue, when you go by the Excelsior Brigade, it comes out to the United States, but then it continues on across, come up to the Emmitsburg Road. There's a horse trail along there also. Close to the end of the horse trail, there's an advance marker for Willards Brigade. It's just hard to get to. You can park and walk up there because you do have the horse trail, but that's how far they go.
Near the Emmitsburg Road?
Yeah. You can, you can look for it. Hope you don't crash, I guess. So, but I wanted to do that, and that's what I had in mind, but I hadn't been out here to see this. I actually walked around there last weekend. I said, maybe we can do this. We'll be here all day. And I'm glad I didn't plan that because I didn't know. I thought maybe they could be the artillery group because they had the line set up. I didn't know if they'd be out here or not. When I rolled up today, I saw them. I did good not doing it. So. All right. Let's see.
Make believe you're in your car.
Thank you. What I'm going to do now is please don't applause. I'm going to thank you all for today because I won't be able to do it afterwards. Thank you. I need 10 volunteers that can read in front of people loudly. I just heard Clint Eastwood.
That's right, he's here.
That's got me happy. You know, I love doing these because I don't do this stuff on a normal tour. I love normal tours. I gave a bike tour yesterday. I'll do another bike tour tomorrow. I give as much energy to the bike tours as I do out here with you all. There's something about these. These kind of dig deep, you know? There's something about this field that's got a hold on me. You talk about the movie, that's all on the surface. You talk about Barlow's Knoll and Shitty Beyond, that's surface stuff. Reynolds and Kate Hewitt, surface stuff. But the accounts of these men who died out here, that's below the surface. And that's where I like to live, below the surface. I don't know if I had anybody out here. I'm not into genealogy and I don't care. I'm out here, and this is the place I love being most of. Don't tell anybody from Park Service here? When I die, Ashley has, and she says hi to everybody that knows her and asks about her. She's not here. I told her, you cremate me, and you walk across Pickett's charge, and you just kind of throw me out. Because there's a whole big sheet of regulations about being buried out here. No, we ain't doing all that. I pay taxes. This is part of my field. Throw me out. I'll be fine. So, all right, who I got? We got 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 3 more. Please, 3. That aren't afraid to read. That's 2. 3. Thank you. All right.
A lot of reading.
See that volunteer thing?
Yeah.
I gave you the whole story at the beginning. No. another volunteer? Is that you? I'm sorry. There you go. I want you to be loud. All right.
The Nation's Dead by Captain E.A. Hartshorn. Memorial Day. A willing tribute to the silent throng, when comrades living join in requiem song, and strewn the flowers where comrades dead have long been laid away. Till memories fade, stern loyalty the grand old Union saves, and on each sacred mound the old flag waves. Thank God our dead, who sleep in Southern graves, rest neath its shade. Brave comrades, rest. No more the scorpion sting of Mini Bull, and crack of solid shot when thousands fall. No more after battle dread roll call. Rest, ever blessed.
Hold it up high. As high as you can to still read.
Emmett M. Whitmore, age 21 years, enlisted July 22nd, 1862 at Arcadia to serve 3 years. Mustered in as private, Company E, August 20th, 1862. Wounded in action July 3rd, 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Died of his wounds July 11th, 1863.
William Whitmore, age 18 years, enlisted August 4th, 1862 at Arcadia to serve 3 years. Mustered in as a private, Company E, August 20th, 1862. Killed in action July 3rd, 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Is the brother to Emmett.
George S. Moss, age 27 years, enlisted August 14th, 1862 at Lansingburg to serve 3 years, mustered in as a private colonel, Company C, August 27, 1862, surrendered September 15, 1862, and paroled September 16, 1862 at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Promoted sergeant prior to April 1863, first sergeant April 14, 1863, wounded in action July 2nd, 1863, died of his wounds July 11th, 1863 at Gettysburg, PA.
Mortimer Garrison, age 19 years, enlisted August 5th, 1862 at Milo to serve 3 years. Mustered in as a private, Company B on August 22nd, 1862. Surrendered September 15th, 1862 and paroled September 16th, 1862 at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Wounded in action July 2nd, 1863 and died of his wounds July 28th, 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Daniel Day, age 22 years, enlisted August 13th, 1862 at Benton to serve 3 years, mustered in as private, Company G, August 22nd, 1862, surrendered September 15th, 1862, and paroled September 16th, 1862 at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Wounded in action July 4th, 1863, and died of his wounds July 20th, 1863 at Field Hospital, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Albert Brown, aged 18 years, enlisted July 22nd, 1862 at Auburn, served 3 years. Mustered in as a private, Company G, August 20th, 1862. Killed in action July 2nd, 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
George Claxton, age 45 years, enlisted August 4th, 1862 at Auburn to serve 3 years. Mustered in as private, Company G, August 20th, 1862. Wounded in action July 2nd, 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Died of his wounds July 25th, 1863.
Henry J. Davis, age 23 years, enlisted August 13, 1862 at Troy to serve 3 years. Mustered in as private, Company B, August 27, 1862. Surrendered September 15, 1862 and paroled September 16, 1862 at Harper's Ferry. Killed in action July 2nd, 1863 at Gettysburg, PA.
Wallace Alonzo, age 28, enlisted July 21, 1862 at Marion to serve 3 years. Mustered in as private, Company A, August 20th, 1862. Killed in action July 2nd, 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
And then I have Wallace George W., age 21 years, enlisted July 30th, 1862 at Marion to serve 3 years. Mustered in as a private, Company A, August 20th, 1862. Wounded in action July 2nd, 1863 at Gettysburg, PA. Died of his wounds July 30th, 1863. Buried in Sodus, New York. He's the brother of Alonzo. Then I have this fella. I don't know who he is. I don't know what his name is. I know he died here. I don't know if he has a wife. I don't know if he has kids. He has parents. But he rests here. And he sacrificed his life here. And that's what these tours are about, is to remember these men who sacrificed their lives here. And on this weekend of all weekends, it's the weekend we do it. And I'm afraid too many people forget about what Memorial Day is. Memorial Day is not just a day off. It's not the beginning of summer. It's a day for these soldiers to be recognized for giving their lives for the country. And so that we can come out here and do this on this day or any other day we choose. We must always remember that. And we must always remember that from these honored dead, we give increased devotion for that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. We here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. And I hope we've done that today, ladies and gentlemen. I sincerely thank you for attending this tour. Thank you. I don't worry about big trees. Thank you very much. No.
It wasn't a ticket, that's why
Decided that you do want to go to Hartford or part of that original count, just show up, it's okay. And also this fellow here, if you're a cyclist, to be in the area.
Obviously, this is Buck Buchanan. Obviously, you're all enthusiasts about Gettysburg. I don't know how many of you are bicycle riders, but for some of the bike clubs in PA, conduct bike tours of Gettysburg. Free, I'm not in trouble. I have one this coming Saturday. Our emphasis will be the impact of artillery on Gettysburg battle. That fun's intended. Although it's about a 15-mile ride, it's over 5.5 hours. So we're not, if you're a rider looking for mileage, this is not your ride. If you want to learn about artillery at Gettysburg, that's what we do. We ride short distances. We stop and talk about what battery did what and who shot John, all that up. If you're interested in that, it's free. It's next Saturday. I'll stand over here to the side. If you want the details, I'd be happy to give them to you. Again, it's for bicyclists, for those that have that interest. Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you very much for coming out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you in June. Good night.
Now I'll give you a number.